Alright, in this demo we're going to drape a 2-dart bodice. So we're going to have a dart coming up from the waistline, and we're also going to have a side dart coming from the side seam to bust. Okay, let's start with our piece of muslin. We're going to start by lining up our selvage with our center front. Make sure you have a piece of muslin that goes at least 4 inches past your neckline, and then a few inches past waist. And let's go ahead and pin down center front. We're going to line up our selvage, the edge of our selvage, right with our center front, pinning every about 2 to 3 inches until we get down to waistline. There we are. Okay. Now let's go ahead and we're going to start here at neckline and pin down our shoulder. So I'm going to start by pinning up my neckline to my shoulder seam. Again, we're starting to get pulling in our fabric, so I'll just clip right down to that pin, and that releases that pulling. And then about another inch away from that pin, I'll go ahead and put another one in. And again, any pulling you get, you can go and simply slash in right to the pin it's entering. Cut it off a little bit. We'll get rid of any of that pulling. And right, I'm going to pin all the way to intersection of shoulder and neckline. Once I get there, I'm going to smooth down shoulder, and I'm going to pin down my shoulder about every inch or so until I get down to armhole. You can just feel your shoulder seam right through. Don't be afraid to readjust pins if you need to. Okay, there we go. I've pinned down to my armhole now. Alright. So now we want to think about where we want the fullness to be that we're basically draping. So we're going to have a dart here at your waist, and it's going to come up princess seam to bust. And then we're going to have a second dart here at side seam. Okay, so we're going to split the fullness between the two areas, here at waist in the front, and then here at side seam, and just below bust line. Alright, so I'm going to start again pinning down my armhole. And I'll just move that ease down as I pin. Right down my armhole. Side seam. And there's side seam. Okay. Now I'm going to come back here to center front, and I'm going to pin in about an inch or two. So here's my princess seam. I want to stop about an inch before princess seam, so right about there. Keep that nice and smooth. And then I'm going to come back here, and you can see I have my fullness right here. Okay, it's pretty smooth at side seam, so I'm going to bring some of that fullness. All right, again, I'm smooth at side seam. I'm going to kind of pinch my fabric right back here. I'm going to pull some of the fullness from this dart here up into the side dart. Okay, so I still have fullness here, but now I've added some here at my side seam. Okay, so again, this is laying nice and flat. I'm smoothing that side seam. All my fullness right now is right here at that kind of front dart area, at the front of at princess seam. Okay, and I'm just going to grab my muslin here, side seam, and I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. And you see I make this crease here, or this other, I'm pulling some of that fullness up into this area to create my other dart. Okay. So now I'm holding that. I'm going to come pin down. I'm going to put a pin right here below that fullness, right at side seam, to hold that in place. And kind of separating it. Before I go any further, I have all this extra muslin that's kind of getting in my way. I'm going to trim it back, leaving about 3 inches or so from side seam. And then the same thing below waist. I don't need all this extra fabric. Easier to work with. Same thing here at armhole and shoulder. I can trim a little bit out of my armhole for now and come up and again leave about an inch or two right above your shoulder seam, like so. Okay. So now I've separated this fullness, so I have some fullness here at in my front waist area and then here on my side seam area. Okay. I'm going to continue here at side seam. I'm going to smooth down. Alright, and this dart is starting, here's my arm plate, it's starting about 3 or so inches down, give or take. Alright, and I'm just going to pin that in place, and I'm going to continue smoothing down my side seam until I get to my waist. Like so. Alright. Now I can pin across my waist and push any extra fabric I have here into this front dart. So pinning across, like so. There we are. Now it's all trapped right where I want it to be at that front princess seam. I can go ahead and pin that dart together. So I'm just going to go through both sides. And come right up. I'm just kind of feeling where my princess seam is, and that's where I'm trying to pin it, right along my princess seam, where we get the best fit and contour. And there we go. Okay, so I've gone ahead and pinned in that front waist dart. Now let's come ahead over to the side seam and pin in the side bust dart. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pin through all layers as if I'm sewing it together. Starting at side seam, and I'll work my way right to bust, like so. And my mark should do it. And there's our side bust dart. Okay, that looks good. Let's go ahead and mark our information on here, or transfer our information from our form onto our muslin. First thing we're going to do is mark our waistline. Again, remember to pick either the top or bottom of whatever you have marking your waistline, and keep that as your true waistline. So I'm marking the top of my twill tape, right to side seam. I'm going to go ahead and mark my bust line as well. Any information we could put on our muslins, our patterns, is great, and we'll make it easier to transfer that information to the muslin and to the, well, if we have alterations or anything, it really helps knowing where things are supposed to line up. Okay, let's go ahead and mark our side seam. So here's side seam right here. I'm going to mark up my waistline, my side seam. Okay. I'm going to measure an inch down below my arm plate. So here's the armhole plate. Measure an inch down from there. Oops. Mark it. And that's where our armhole will blend to. Let's come over here to intersection of center, front, and neckline. We're going to measure down a 1/2 inch below the neckline seam in our dress form. So that's a 1/2 inch down. And then at intersection of shoulder and neckline, I'm going to come down and follow the neck curve a little bit. And then I'm going to blend right into this 1/2 inch mark, coming right up into intersection of armhole and shoulder, or sorry, neckline and shoulder. And then I'm going to follow my shoulder seam right down into my armhole. And then I'm going to mark my armhole and follow that. And again, I'm going to blend it to this point that's 1 inch below the arm plate. So I'll come down, and that blending will start right about mid armhole, so right about here. And I like to come down a little bit here, and then I start coming up this way, and then I just meet the two in the middle. So right about there. There we go. Let's make sure we mark our darts, both sides of them. Here's the side bust dart. Mark that. And same thing here. And my waist dart, I'm going to mark both sides of that as well. And here's center front. Alright. Now we've just gone ahead and draped our front bodice with a dart at waistline and then a side bust dart.